draft Separation of Waste England Regulations 2025.
I call the Minister to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today and to be moving that this committee considers the draft Separation of Waste (England) Regulations 2025. These regulations were laid in draft before the House on the 3rd of December 2024 and confirm the final policy positions for simpler recycling in England. For too long, households in England have been presented with a muddled and confusing patchwork of approaches to bin collections. These reforms will ensure that across England, people will be able to recycle the same materials, whether at home, work or school, putting an end to the confusion over what can and cannot be recycled in different parts of the country, something that we all as Members of Parliament experience on a weekly basis. We're all responsible for addressing our country's waste problem. We know citizens want to play their part and recycle as much as possible, but they're frustrated by limited and confusing recycling services. Through these reforms, we're empowering citizens to turn their good intentions into simple, effective actions. Simpler recycling is one of the three core pillars of the government's ambitious collection and packaging reforms, alongside the forthcoming deposit return scheme and the extended producer responsibility scheme for packaging. Together, we estimate that the collection and packaging reforms will support 21,000 jobs in our nation and regions and stimulate more than £10 billion of investment in recycling capability over the next decade. The reforms are also estimated to deliver carbon savings of over 46 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2035, with a value of more than £10 billion in carbon benefits. Since 2015, household recycling rates in England have plateaued at around 40 to 45%, and they actually decreased to 43% in 2022. So we urgently need to take steps to improve this recycling performance. This SI, Simpler Recycling, will end the postcode lottery of bin collections in England by ensuring all households and workplaces can recycle the same core waste streams: plastic, metal, glass, paper and card, and food waste with garden waste for households upon request. Simpler Recycling will improve services for householders by introducing weekly food collections for all households in England and curbside plastic film collections. This will constitute a significant contribution towards meeting our ambition to recycle 65% of municipal waste by 2035 and our target to reduce residual waste generated per capita by 50% by 2042, compared with 2019 levels. These changes are a critical first step towards meeting the commitment in our manifesto to transition to a resource-resilient, productive, circular economy which delivers long-term, sustainable, resilient growth. Let me draw members' attention to the exemptions introduced by this instrument. The legislation to implement the core legislative requirements of Simpler Recycling was introduced by the previous government through the Environment Act 2021. This legislation has already come into force, which in practice means that Simpler Recycling will automatically come into effect in March 2025 for workplaces and March 2026 for households. Sections 45A, 45AZA and 45AZB of the Environmental Protection Act 1990, as amended by the Environment Act 2021, require that the 6 recyclable waste schemes, that is, plastic, glass, metal, paper and card, food waste and garden waste, are collected separately alongside residual waste. The legislation states that local authorities and other waste collectors can make use of an exemption to collect these recyclable materials together if it is not technically or economically practicable to collect them separately, or there is no significant environmental benefit to do so. However, if using an exception, the waste collectors must produce a written assessment to record the justification. Laid in draft before this House on the 3rd of December 2024, this instrument sets sensible exemptions from these conditions, allowing any combination of the recyclable waste streams, metal, glass and plastic, to be collected together at all times. This exemption applies to both collections from households and from workplaces. It also allows food waste and garden waste to be collected together from households at all times. Waste collectors will not have to justify co-collection of any of these materials, as they would have to under the primary legislation as it currently stands. And we have taken this decision because the Secretary of State has determined, based on the evidence, that co-collection of these materials does not affect the potential for those materials to be recycled. We will not include paper and card in the exemption. This must, by default, be collected separately from the other dry recyclable waste streams. This applies to both collections from households and from workplaces. This is because paper and card are particularly vulnerable to cross-contamination from food and liquid commonly found on other recycling materials, which could significantly reduce the potential for collected material to be recycled. However, we do want to provide flexibility for local councils and for other waste collectors. Where waste collectors consider it is not technically or economically practicable to collect paper and card separately, or where there is no significant environmental benefit to doing so, they may collect paper and card together with other dry recycling, if they provide a written assessment to document the justification. Waste collectors will decide where an exception applies. There is no need to request permission from DEFRA or the Environment Agency to co-collect paper and card where an exception applies. We have published guidance for local councils and other waste collectors to support their decision-making regarding the co-collection of paper and card with other dry recyclable materials where appropriate. All exemptions will be automatic, and local councils and other waste collectors will not need to apply for these. They will only need to produce a written assessment to co-collect paper and card with other recyclable materials. Under the primary legislation, without this instrument, they would have had to produce written assessments to co-collect any combination of recyclable materials together. These exemptions mean the new default requirement for most households will be 4 containers for food waste, mixed with garden waste if appropriate, paper and card, all other dry recyclable materials, these being plastic, metal and glass, and non-recyclable waste. As we are maintaining flexibility, councils and other waste collectors may choose to separate materials further if this suits local need. This is a sensible, straightforward, common sense approach to the collection of recycling for every household and workplace in England. This instrument will also mean that micro-firms, defined as workplaces with fewer than 10 full-time equivalent employees, will not need to arrange for the recycling of the core recyclable waste streams as required by the Environmental Protection Act 1990 until the 31st of March 2027. We recognise that these micro-firms, of which there are an estimated 1.8 million in England, may face more challenges introducing the changes, so this phasing period provides more time for them to prepare. These are substantial reforms, and we will support local councils and workplaces to deliver these new requirements in the most cost-efficient way. Right now, we're focused on raising awareness, providing guidance for councils and workplaces on how to deliver efficient, effective services, including with webinars and toolkits. For local councils, we are working to distribute funding for food waste collections as soon as possible. We have already provided £258 million of capital funding and will also provide resource and ongoing funding. We will continue to engage with stakeholders to understand the challenges they face and ensure the successful delivery of simpler recycling. So let me conclude. The need for simpler recycling has never been clearer. By simplifying what households and workplaces across England can recycle, these long-awaited, much-anticipated reforms will jumpstart England's faltering recycling rate, maximising environmental benefits, ensuring we keep our precious resources in use for longer, unleashing investment and resilient economic opportunities. I beg to move, Madam Chair.
Yeah. The question is that the committee has considered the draft Separation of Waste England Regulations 2025. I call the Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mrs Furness. It's a great privilege to be serving under your chairship today, and it's a great pleasure to be sat opposite the Minister today, again on various issues. Firstly, can I thank the Minister for bringing these important regulations to committee. The principle of improving our recycling is one that I wholeheartedly support. As Conservatives, we have, I believe, a very strong track record in this area, and I thank the Minister for graciously acknowledging the importance of our landmark Environment Act in 2021. Between 2010 and 2022, we reduced the amount of waste going to landfill by about 47% and cut the amount of biodegradable waste going to landfill by 46%. We also introduced a simpler recycling collection system to make it easier to recycle, saving people time and stopping confusion to boost recycling rates. Additionally, our introduction of the single-use plastic bag charge in 2015 led to a remarkable drop in plastic bag usage, significantly reducing plastic waste. I am very pleased to see that this Labour government has drawn on our previous consultations to shape this particular statutory instrument. In 2021, the Conservative government conducted an initial consultation on consistency in household and business recycling. This was followed by an additional targeted consultation in 2023 that focused on exemptions to allow co-collection of recyclable waste streams. This process engaged English waste collection and disposal authorities, the Environment Agency, and key stakeholders across the waste sector. This legislation that we are talking about today, set to take effect at the end of March this year, introduces mandatory waste separation for businesses and non-domestic premises. Businesses with fewer than 10 employees, micro-businesses, have been given an extended timeline until March 2027 to comply. Under these regulations, businesses will need to separate their waste into 3 key streams: dry recyclables, such as glass, plastic, metal, paper and card, food waste and residual waste. Recycling is so important, and we must continuously look at ways to increase it and make it easier for councils to carry out their roles in waste management. Finally, Madam Chair, I just do have a couple of clarification questions for the Minister that I hope she may be able to address. Firstly, can the Minister confirm what specific campaigns or initiatives will be launched to ensure that businesses and non-domestic premises are fully aware of these changes that are coming down the line? And secondly, what measures and indeed potentially what reassurances are being put out there and put in place to help businesses, particularly those small and micro businesses, can comply with these regulations without facing financial burdens? So in closing, Madam Chair, this is an important issue, and I look forward to seeing where this legislation and very important recycling agenda progresses in the future. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much. And can I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind comments? And I think it's fair to say that there has been cross-party unity on 2 of these 3 reforms. I was very surprised to see that introducing the deposit return scheme in Parliament last week, that his colleague, not him, he had the very good sense not to be present in that debate, chose to divide the House on that. And I would just say these were in-flight regulations. They have taken such a long time from when things were first promised back in 2018. And my very strong feeling is that we should not let perfection be the enemy of the good. We can all create the perfect recycling system, but we have to deal with the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. And I do agree with him that the single-use carrier bag charge was one of the really landmark reforms that he did, that really, by introducing a charge, not a benefit, people respond better to a charge psychologically than a benefit. And it's driven that huge behaviour change, which has meant that you very rarely see plastic bags littered. And of course, all of these reforms are about tackling the avalanche of litter that is plaguing our rivers, lakes and seas, turning up on our beaches, killing our wildlife. And all the evidence is that if we have unclear and inconsistent collections, then people don't know what to do with their waste, so they end up just putting it outside, and that's when we end up with the fly tipping epidemic that we're trying to tackle. Campaigns. He asked me about campaigns. I think, first of all, I think it's fair to say that these regulations have been a long time in the making, and so the local authorities certainly know that they're coming. And I hosted, with my officials, a round table with the local authorities last week in the department, where Merseyside Waste Authority, Greater Manchester Waste Authority, and several of the London Waste Authorities were present. And I think it's fair to say that there is a huge appetite, and Wiltshire County Council as well, who I know have been really pressing hard on the recycling for plastic films, which this instrument does introduce. So we had a range, we had district councils, county councils and the big metropolitans in there. So I think there is awareness. I think where I have been sort of, given that obviously the timing of the election and recess and all of that and parliamentary time is the readiness of businesses. But we are, as I've said, working with the Environment Agency. So obviously some stakeholders may find introduction of the reforms more challenging than others. We're going to work with them to support them in overcoming any difficulties they might face in relation to compliance within the legislative timeframes. Of course, if you're a waste collector, you have every incentive to tell businesses that these changes are coming, because new collections and new business opportunities do flow for the waste collection and recycling industry from these reforms. For workplaces, the Environment Agency will be the regulator, and if there is non-compliance, they will of course issue a notice. This could be against the workplace as the producer of the waste who is non-compliant with the arrangements made by their waste collector, or against the waste collector who is not providing a compliance service. But obviously, you know, their enforcement and sanctions policy requires them to act proportionately. Oh, bless me, sorry. And to balance the risk posed, seriousness and impact of potential breaches when considering their response, while considering all individual facts and circumstances of a potential breach. The Environment Agency and I and my officials are committed to supporting businesses, both waste producers and collectors, in understanding their duties under these regulations. And we will be delivering The Environment Agency will be delivering a range of engagement activities, guidance and resources up to and crucially beyond the commencement of the legislation. I think it would be naive to consider that we wave a magic wand and suddenly 1st of April all of this happens. I think we have to treat this first year as our kind of, you know, the gradual change. We will be working on that. We have worked with the waste authorities. I hope that has answered the questions he has raised. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that the committee has considered the draft separation of Waste England Regulation 2025. Aye. Aye. Thank you. As many as of that opinion say aye. Sorry, just a line out there. And on the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it and the ayes have it. Unlock. Oh, order. Where does the unlock? That's it.